Today, we're going to talk about how to sound more senior on your resume and in a job interview, but I could have titled this, How to Get the Job. That's really what it's all about. So this is not a talk for senior level people to sound more senior. It's for everyone. I have examples today that I'm going to give you from somebody who was 24 years old, who we just want to make sound more knowledgeable. And I'm going to show you how to do that. It doesn't matter what you do. I've got 10 great tips. I'm going to hit 5 on the resume, 5 on the interview, and how to sound more knowledgeable, how to sound smarter, how to sound like you have more experience. That's what it's all about. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's really broken up into really kind of three parts of the talk. The first is I want to talk about concepts. How do I want you to think about how to sound on your resume and in an interview? What are the concepts you should anchor on? There's 3 of those. Then I'm going to give you 5 tips on the resume. I'm going to give you 5 tips on the interview. So if you're excited, let me know that in the chat if you're here with me live. But let's get going. So when you think about, I get this question a lot. Andy, I want to sound more senior than I am, or I'm shooting for positions that are maybe a little bit of a stretch, which I'm a fan of, right? I want you to be a little bit scared when you take a new job because that's what makes it interesting. But no matter who you are, no matter what you're about, you want to make sure you're showing the right impact. You're showing that you have the experience, and you're showing the employer they can count on you. So there's 3 things I want you to think about. As I mentioned in the opener here, we're going to run through 3 concepts I want you to get down. Screenshot me, write these down. I don't care. But anytime you're trying to market yourself, I want you to think in these terms. The first one, and I couldn't figure out what analogy I wanted to use, so I wrote them both down on the card because I'm not sure which one I like better. But it's about repetitions, not time. Not time. 1 year is not 1 year's worth of equal experience. It's calendar time. Yes, we all have the same amount of calendar time, but we don't all gain the same experience. Or if you want to think of it another way, it's the mileage, not the age. Okay? So what do I mean by this? Well, I want you to take me, for example. I coach 500 people, individuals, a year. It's about 10 a week. Some I have 8, some I have 12, some weeks I have 20, some weeks I have 3. But most of the time, it's just a little less than a dozen people a week. That's 500 different people I get to touch. Some of them are repeat. I counsel on a repetitive basis. But for the most part, those are individuals who need to scoot in the right direction, or prep for an interview, maybe salary negotiation, maybe set their path on their job search, things like that. I see 500 different scenarios from people all over the world and on every inhabited continent. That's a lot of mileage in 1 year. You do that for 6 years, that's 3,000 people, as opposed to some other career coach who might coach 10 people a year, or some life coach that might coach 10 people a year. It's a huge difference. The project manager who manages 3 small projects versus a project manager that manages, say, 1 long project, 12 months. Maybe these are all 12 months, but maybe they're 3 smaller. Maybe there's iterations. I want this person, because this person not only sees different things on different projects, but also the fact that they have to manage a portfolio of projects gives them additional organizational skills and other things and balancing and all that great stuff. So I want you to think in terms of the reps, not the time. And I'm going to use examples throughout as we go through the resume and through the interview. So don't you worry. Next thing, it's about the impact, not the complexity of the solution. What do I mean by this? Let's illustrate this one with a little story. I was coaching this one gentleman a few years back, and he's a CIO, he's a senior person, and he was about to go in front of a 6-person board of directors. They were looking to bring him on to manage this. I think it was a hospice, some sort of healthcare collection of maybe hospice centers or something like that. Healthcare kind of systems. And we were preparing him. I was preparing him. He and I were preparing for his interview. And I looked at what was going to be important in his hire. And I said to him, as I'm looking through his resume and we are working on his power stories, and I'm saying to him, I want to make sure you have this kind of story, this kind of story, this kind of story. One where you created something that helped the top line revenue grow. One where you created infrastructure that saved cost and sped things up. And I went through all this, and he was trying to think of what the best stories were. And he said, well, I did this one solution, but it's really not a big deal. The solution wasn't very complicated. I'm like, it might not have been a big deal, but it's going to sound like one when I get done with it. So what happened? He said, well, we had this issue with the nurses that would go and, visit the patients, and they would be with them, throughout the day and getting set up and getting their hours in and all the equipment and everything that needed to be invoiced to all of our vendors. And, there would be errors in filling out the forms. We would then mail the invoices to the vendors. It would take a week or two to get there. They would find there's errors. We would have to go through this process. It would take a few more weeks. Anyway, there was a collections issue. So I said, okay, don't tell me what your solution was. What kind of ultimate cash flow did you improve as a result of this solution you created that eliminated these business problems and these hiccups that were occurring in the process? And he said, well, I don't really know how to quantify that. I said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, can you estimate how much time did you save in terms of capturing the data, getting the invoice to the customer? Because that in and of itself is going to save time. But what it's also going to do is it's going to eliminate errors. You're going to get paid faster. He said, well, on average, it was about 2 weeks, but I don't really know how to quantify this. And I said, well, how big's your company? What's the annual revenue? He said, 144 million. Does sound like 12 million a month to me. So if you can accelerate half of that every 2 weeks all year long, that's a $6 million gain. That sounds awesome. He said, well, it was really only a DocuSign system that was taking some data that we were feeding into a system. It was very simple. Like, it isn't about the simplicity of the solution, and it isn't even if it's an afterthought for you or you could do it in your sleep. And it certainly is not how much you spent on it, because the fact of the matter is the less time you spend and the less money you spend on the solution, the greater the ROI that you would realize. Even better. I don't want it to be a complicated solution. So when he tells this story in the interview and they're all wowed because I said, you highlight the impact. And you talk about the system you created, and that it took, if they dig into what was the solution as if they cared, you just let them know. I took advantage of automating a process that took advantage of DocuSign's platform and so on. You choose your words so that you're using the proper terminology to help them understand your concepts. Impact is greater than the solution itself. You're not going to regale me with how complicated something was. I want you to make something complicated simple. That's the second thing. The third thing, speaking of complexity, is the complexity of what is around you always trumps your individual scene. Okay, what do I mean by this? Are any of you, show of hands, go ahead and let me know, because I always watch the chat after. Are any of you like project managers, but you're technically an individual contributor because you don't necessarily have direct reports, but you're managing a project where you've got tens, dozens, hundreds of people that are all contributing because you've got people that you're managing on committees like the steering committee, the risk management committee, the weekly status team leader sessions that you're having. You've got people that you've grabbed onto your team that are business analysts or technical analysts, and although technically they're only working with you during this project and you don't actually manage them and write their evaluation, you're corralling them. And don't even get me started on the users and the vendors and the partners and the software products you're implementing and the integrations you're doing and all of these things that are going on, but you have no direct reports. Well, the complexity of the situation, to me, that's vast. You and what your job function title, how many direct reports you have. I want the person. It's harder to direct 100 people, none of whom report to you, when you have to influence without authority, than it is to be able to boss people around that just need to listen to you out of fear. who's tracking with what I'm saying. This drives the discussion, not this. So I'm going to show you how to take care of that. So just to recap real quickly, I want you to keep these concepts in mind. Concept number one, it's not the age, it's the mileage. Concept number two, it's the impact, not the solution. Don't get me wrong, I like sexy solutions, but I'm talking about how to sound more knowledgeable. And it's the complexity, not your individual situation. Okay, so those are the concepts we're going to anchor on as I walk you through this stuff. All right, who's enjoying this while I take a sip of this delicious tea? All right. Now, before I get into the resume portion, I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to sound more senior, knowledgeable, and more experienced. 5 resume tips. First thing I want you to do, because you are the first to know this, but Kara and I put out a brand new resume webinar that you can watch anytime you want. And the only thing you need to do, Kara can drop this in the chat, or it's in the description of this live show, or it will be in the description if you are watching this on recording. But you go to this page that says Resume Writing Free Webinar, Andrew LaCivita. It's got this really fun guy in a pretty pressed shirt, and you will get the full-fledged how to write a resume. You don't even need to pay for my resume writing workshop if you don't want to. Don't buy anything from anybody else, and whatever you do, don't enlist a resume writer. But all you got to do is sign up for this. You can get the resume content builder. It's, you know what? It's pretty damn sexy if I don't mind saying so myself. And the reason that I interrupted this awesome teaching segment for that little commercial break is because I'm going to blitz through some things. And if you don't go to the Andy LaCivita School of Resume Writing, I want you to know you can better understand these concepts if you take in that free webinar. It's 70 minutes of straight teaching. Straight teaching. That's it. So I'm going to teach you how to write the resume. So go grab that. Okay. Part number 1. At the top of that resume is a career summary. I call it the career profile. Sounding more experienced, sounding more senior, controlling the narrative, sounding more knowledgeable is aggregating in the career profile. Now, the second thing I want to say about free videos and free webinars is if you're here with me live just on Tuesday, like 48 hours ago, or I guess maybe 55 hours ago, I released a video on, wait for it, because I have a card because I want to make it easy for me to find these things. The career profile is the most important part of the resume. You could watch this on my YouTube channel. I literally just released the video 2 days ago. And what do I mean by aggregating? Well, the career profile is a summary, but it's not a summary just of who you are. It's a summary and an aggregation of what you've accomplished. So anytime you get a chance to roll up the numbers, what did I say about repetitions? Quantities. So if you're a seller, have you sold $50 million in products and services? You didn't sell it all at one company, or you didn't sell it all in 1 year. That's okay. But over your career, maybe there's 5 there, 10 there, 20 there, right? And you're adding it up, another 10 or whatever, right? Well, do you manage global projects? Great. Have you been in 5 countries, 5 continents? Have you done it for a portfolio of 50 clients? What is it that you can actually roll up? Remember, it's the reps. And what you're doing here is you're doing this for context, because this is what's going to give you heft anytime you can roll it up. And then you can delineate it in the rest of the resume. But anybody who tells you not to have a career profile doesn't understand psychologically how this anchors their biases initially, and then they look for supporting detail, which you're going to have. Do the roll-up. It's a roll-up of accomplishments. It will make you sound heftier, not fatter. You know what I'm saying. Okay. Second thing, as I like you to lay out your professional experience section, I like you to put the company on the left, and then a little description of the company, and then underneath the company, I like you to have your title, and underneath your title, I like you to have a description. Why do I want you to have a description and not just go right into bullets? Because in the description, you could put all the mundane stuff that is not technically an accomplishment, because bullets on a resume should be reserved for the great 8. If you don't know what that is, just look on my YouTube channel and search the Great 8 or how to show your value on your resume. But what you get to do in the housekeeping is what? Put boring stuff that's your activities, but you get to actually articulate with quantities and other measurables what it is that you're doing. So as an example, underneath your title, if you could get numbers of any kind that show context. So what do I mean? So if you're the customer service manager and you manage the customer service team, that's not really an accomplishment. That's just what you do every day. And let's say you have 15 CSRs, customer service reps. Well, that might be something to know because that number tells me the size of your team. Manage the entire customer service department with 15 CSRs supporting 50,000 clients. Awesome, right? Gives me some kind of idea. Maybe how much revenue does your company make? How much are you supporting across 5 countries, across 5 regions? If you are a project manager, how many projects have you done? 17 infrastructure projects over these 5 years. Awesome. Heft. You get mini aggregation roll-ups in the title. It's like a mini career profile underneath the title. Roll-up. Boring, housekeeping, awesome ways to score points. Who's tracking? Who's tracking? You get what I'm saying, right? It's about the numbers. What about projects? So regarding projects, the example I gave about the CIO with the DocuSign, it's not about the solution. It's actually about the impact. So what you want to make sure that you're talking about here is what is it that happened? Okay, let me give you a different example. So there was this young lady I coached. I think she was about 25 years old. She's been working 3 years. And she says, Coach Andy, my resume just doesn't pop. I don't really know how to play up what I've done, and I really would like to better advertise myself. We had a coaching session. I wanted to better understand who she was. And she had this little bullet on her resume that said, I said, well, it said about putting an Excel spreadsheet together to do some extract, transfer, and load ETL of data, music, artists, blah, blah, this. I don't know. I can't remember. I think she worked for Sony. And I said, well, tell me, I think her name was Susan, and tell me, Susan, what was that about? She said, oh, that was, like Spotify and iTunes and this and that. And I said, yeah, of course. I listen to my music every day. She said, well, we have all these artists that we have contracts with, and with streaming of music, there's certain ways in which they get their royalties, and our system was a hot mess, and we couldn't really properly pay royalties. We didn't have a really good handle on the plays and all the parameters that went along with doing this. I said, oh, okay. She says, so I put a spreadsheet together that siphoned off, and I used these systems, and I was able to get this data and populate it into the spreadsheet so that, okay. And I said, well, how many artists are we talking about? It's like tens of thousands. How many dollars are we talking about? Millions and millions and millions of dollars, right? In royalties. I said, well, okay, it doesn't matter how simple your solution was. You're basically affecting your company's ability probably to remain in compliance, contractually obligated to pay these people with whom they have these contracts, not to mention the artists who poured their heart and soul into their craft, into this music that's entertained millions of people. But think about how much of an impact that is. So we are articulating the effect of what she did, not the complexity. It's just an Excel spreadsheet. It's not what's the solution. It's what do I always say to you? It's not what you do. It's what happened as a result of what I do. Well, tens of thousands of artists were getting paid millions and millions of dollars that they probably were not getting paid either accurately or on time or both. That can be quantified. That can be played up. That's a story. And when you start that story with, right, we had 10,000 artists, they were this and that, you get the idea. It's about the impact. Third one. This one comes up a lot. Managing people is not about the number of direct reports you have. You can itemize those key initiatives, responsibilities, and you could talk about driving projects when it comes to teams or people, right? That project manager example that I threw out early in the talk. Are you managing 17 teams in 7 different countries that have 107 people contributing to this project from a variety of users or stakeholders or executives or vendors or partners or whoever, right? The analysts, the technologists, the team leads, and so on, engineers, whatever it might be. You want to play this up. Now, if you had a sizable number of direct reports and you want to put it there, that's cool too. But I want to understand the landscape of what you're doing. Now, I know some of you are out there saying, well, Andy, I can't get ahead because, and anytime you start a sentence with I can't get ahead because you think you have some limitation or you don't think you have the experience or you think that's being held against you, that's a defeatist attitude for starters. Second thing is, I would challenge you to paint a better picture that helps illustrate what in fact it was that you were doing. And this is a way to do that. And the other thing is, this is a great place for me to insert this little comment. Any one of these in and of themselves is not going to all of a sudden make you sound more senior. But the combination of all of these things done all of the time is going to make you crush it. Okay? So you got the management of the people. And then the last thing I want to say on the resume is, watch your language, please. There's many areas that you want to stress that will give you heft and make it so that you sound more knowledgeable, experienced, more senior. You want to be talking in terms of what are the business goals, what are the drivers, right? So for that CIO, well, the driver is cash flow is revenue, right? If I had $6 million that sat in my bank account for 2 weeks, it would make a lot of money, right? That's dollars and cents. I knew it. I was writing strategy. Oh, wait, I got it right. I thought I had a typo. I was going to say, I wonder if I have a typo in any of these. I wrote these so fast this morning. The strategy. Everything you do has a strategy to it. It has a framework. It has a playbook. It's a system. It doesn't matter if you implement one little itty bitty thing. That was a spreadsheet system. She built a system that integrated with external streaming applications that extracted, transferred data, loaded it. She analyzed it, parsed it, whatever. There were steps to that. It wasn't just popping up a spreadsheet. And then the other thing, language like founded, created, pioneered, first to market, first in the whatever, breaking into a new country. Any of those, this language elevates you because people pay more for systems. They want people who are organized and have approaches. Okay, so on the resume, just very quickly to recap the resume, these 5 things will give your resume a lot of punch. Aggregation in the career profile, and remember, I have a nice video out there for you to watch. Career profile is the most important part of the resume. Second thing is under the titles. You get a housekeeping area. Put the numbers in for context. It's going to give you some heft. The other thing is with your projects, it's not about the solution. It's about the impact. Again, if you are following my resume writing, teaching, and showing the effect, what I call the effect, the benefits is the first thing, and then the cause, that's what you did. And you're not even getting into this total solution on your resume, but you're talking about what it was you did to make that happen. You'll be in order. It isn't about the number of direct reports you have. It's about the influence that you have, and the language that you sprinkle throughout should be adhering to high-level terminology that paints a picture. I'm not talking about throwing in a bunch of generic word vomit. I'm talking about carefully choosing. I re-engineered. When you changed the process, you re-engineered it. You had a system, you had a framework, you were a pioneer, and so on. Okay, so that's the resume. Okay, if you're loving this so far, I'm only 25 in. Give me a thumbs up. All right, now I'm gonna hit the interviewing. So you do that on the resume, you're gonna get the interviews. When you get the interviews, number 1 and 2, we're taking them both at the same time. If you don't know what my CAR formula is, I'm not going to go too deep into it because I have a video titled The Job Interview Formula Guaranteed to Get You Hired. Just check this out for more information on my CAR technique. My CAR stands for context, approach. The first part of the approach is your playbook, your framework, your system. Think number of steps. Everything you did has a number of steps. Even if you had to think first, that's a step. You did a diagnosis, that's a step. You've evaluated it, that's a step. You developed some solutions, that's a step. You tested the solutions, that's a step. You had to pitch the solutions, that's a step. So you've got an approach, and then you got detailed actions. What did you do in each of the steps? That's your detailed actions. And I use the word detailed in air quotes. And then what's the result? Now, if you do this right, the context up front, we'll talk with whoever the interviewer is about the opportunity. We were losing $6 million in cash flow every 2 weeks. Okay, I'm going to tell you how I fixed that, and I'm foreshadowing the result. And then you're going to end it with the result and any benefit extensions and any additional surprises that work to your favor. That's the CAR formula. That's all I'm going to say about that. Context. When you start a story, most of you start with, I did this first, I did this second, I did this third. That's not where a story starts. You have to paint the picture of what was happening. Why was I even doing what I was doing in the first place? So you've got to have some context. So going back to the story about the music, we had over 10,000 artists, none of whom were getting their royalties. The royalties that we owed them were $38 million. That's context, has nothing to do with the spreadsheet. I'm telling you, we had a big problem. Not only were people not getting paid and we owed them millions of dollars, but we were exposed for lawsuits because we were not compliant with the contracts that we developed and signed, and so on and so forth. That's the exposition. That's the context. That's the business challenge. That will give you heft. It doesn't matter how complicated the solution is. I don't care how complicated the solution is. I want to know what impact you made. So that's a big, big deal. And then the approach part, what you always want to do here, this will always make you sound more senior, is you give them your framework. So for that woman, Susan, with the music, so the first thing that I had to do was I had to inventory and assess all of the different streaming applications that were being used. Then I had to do a diagnostic on each one of them to understand where our artists were and this and that and the other thing, and which ones we had accurate integrations. Boom. Number 3, then I needed to import them all into a consolidated solution. I didn't even tell you what the solution was, just that I needed to do that. That's the step. And so as you're walking them through this is what's going to make you sound more systematic, more logical, more organized. They're going to feel comfortable that you bring a playbook with you, or that when you encounter something, you'll know what to do next, or you have an approach, a strategy. And people pay more for that. You pay more for my job search coaching program because it's a whole infrastructure and a system. And not only is it systematic by steps and tools and all of that, it's systematic by modality. It gives you various ways to get to me through watching a recording, talking with me online, talking to my digital clone online, talking to me in a group format, and so on. That's a system too that takes advantage of all your modalities so that you can learn any way you want. However you want to paint it, systems are cool. So I was coaching somebody the other day, and she said, well, I went in and I changed the way that we got this data into negotiating the contracts. And so, like, you didn't change anything. You re-engineered so that you could take this data and expedite it and load it and so on and so forth. This language matters. This is how you tell a story. So make sure that you watch the Job Interview Formula Guaranteed to Get You Hired. I go way into my CAR technique, and I give you a great example as well. Okay. Interview 3, same kind of thing. Repetitions beat calendar time. Let me tell you about this woman I coached. Another young lady, this one in California as well, and about 24 years old, had 1 year of work experience, had taken a year off because one of her family members was sick and she needed to take care of her grandmother. And she was returning to the workforce after 1 year of working with a consultancy, and it was what you'd call loosely a healthcare consultancy where they were doing a lot of data research, and they had clients that were pharma companies, hospital groups, doctor groups, different healthcare systems. And it was a boutique consultancy. And so as a young professional, and she was a consultant, but like did a lot of market research, clinical data research, trial research, these kinds of things. She said, Andy, I need a coaching session because, I'm interviewing and I'm getting some questions and I have the experience, but it seems to fall flat. Meaning like I try to explain it. She said, so okay. So we get together and she said, I said, give me your background. Let's walk through all this. Give me some examples of what we're dealing with so that I know what we need to fix. And she said, for example, they asked me if I had this experience in risk management and communicating this with the doctors directly. I said, okay. She said, I have done that. I said, okay, gotcha. How did you answer it? So, he asked me point blank, do I have any experience? And I told him yes. And watch this. Yes, that's part of what I do. Okay. But she said, he didn't really seem impressed in this and that. Okay, let's back up. I want you to tell me what you do on average for most of your projects, for most of your clients, but especially the ones where you're interacting with the doctors. So, it's 5 steps, right? So we get to the 5 steps. And I do this research, and then I run it through this, and then I have to work on the copy and make sure all these things are exposed. Then I do the risk discussion with the doctors, and then we do this and that, we tie it up, and off it goes. It's okay, this 4th step. When you work with the doctors, what is that like? She said, it's usually like a 3 or 4 hour session where I present my findings, exposing the risks of this and that, of the pharmaceutical or of the whatever, of the treatment. I said, okay, and how many doctors have you spoken with? She said, it's about 80. I said, in the 1 year, 80. I said, how many times have you done this? She said, I've done it 8. So like some have 8 doctors, some have 12 doctors. It's like a room full of these people. And I said, okay, so let me get this straight. So one of the major steps that you do over and over and over again, because you do this like almost every month. You did it like almost every month. Mileage, not age, mileage. So she did it 8 times, affecting 80 doctors. But not just that, because it's the drug itself that's going to go to market based on research, data, and recommendations and all these other things that she's explaining. Okay. When you get into a discussion, you say, if you ever get asked and they're interested in wanting to understand that, it isn't, yes, I know how to do that and it's part of what I do, because that poo-poos it and it downplays it. And you only have a year of calendar experience under your belt. It has to be, for each project, there are 5 steps that I go through, this, and this. The 4th step, because you asked me directly, I'm going to go right to it, is the session, the review session about risk with the doctors. And it's usually a 4-hour session. I'm usually speaking to somewhere between 8 and a dozen doctors. And over the course of the year, I've done that 8 times and then she could get into a little more color. Sounds way better than, yes, that's part of what I do. Do you see the difference in the emphasis and how the number of repetitions matters? 500 people a year. You are not showing up on a Zoom with me and going to surprise me. Okay? It just isn't happening. I know all of you think you're unique, but I've seen it before. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter how old you are. I just have too much data at my fingertips up in this skull-shaped kingdom. You get it? Repetitions matter. I want the person who reps it, not the person. There's project managers that work for 15 years that do 1 project a year. Some people do that in 15 years in 1 year, right? You're repeating the same thing over and over again. What else do senior and smart people do? They're consultative, right? What are your problems? Tell me where it hurts. Let me ask you some questions. I don't show up to a Zoom session and say, hey, you, okay, here's your problem and here's what we're going to do. No, I have to ask questions, right? Diagnose it just like a doctor would. I want you to do this. All right, so when you're in an interview, you're going to get a chance to ask questions, or it's going to be back and forth. If it's conversational, I'm starting with their problems. What might I be talking about? I'm talking about this. What are your goals and problems? What are your biggest challenges in achieving them? What have you tried? Since you've tried that, are you better off or worse off? Have you considered this? Well, we had that problem too, and here's how we solved it. Right? Instead of, oh, just do this, because senior people investigate. So if you want more on this, guess what? Another free video, 2 questions to ask in a job interview that will get you hired. And while I've been spitting out these free videos, I know my trusty partner in crime, Kara's been dropping them in the chat. And they're also in the description of the live show. Okay, and number 5, which is really number 10. Industry trends. Because what? Knowledgeable people. I don't care if you're 23 years old, 22, 23, 25, 27, 77. Doesn't matter. You got to know what's happening in your market, or you got to be up to date. And to the extent that you can have conversations around industry trends, whether you're asking the questions because for those of you that go to the interview intervention communication that gets you hired, Andy's School of Interview Question Asking, you are always presenting information before you're making the ask because you want to sell yourself. You know, I've noticed in the industry, the trend is moving toward. Has your company started to do that, or do they have plans to do that? That gets this in, right? Or I've noticed, or when I was at my last company, and I anticipated this was going to occur. Here's how we changed it. Where are you on that spectrum? Right? Prediction. Okay, so to recap the interview portion, right? Context up front, that's number 1. That gives you lift. The approach, number 1 in my CAR technique, is the framework. You can watch the video, the job interview tip or formula guaranteed to get you hired. Tip number 3, it's about the reps, baby. If you give somebody a playbook with repetitions and practice and a formula, they'll get better faster. They will have seen more quicker. Be consultative, so you want to ask key questions. And again, you can check out that video on the 2 questions to ask. And then the last thing is number 5, make sure you are industry trend knowledgeable. All right. I knew I could get that all done in 40 minutes. If you enjoyed it, click the like button, share this. People need help. Make sure you're subscribed to the station if you're not already. And don't forget to watch the new resume webinar. We just popped it up. You're the first people to hear about it if you're here with me live. So if you are here with me live, we're going to the chat. If you're watching this on the recording, I'll see you next week.